Hi guys, Mr. Urrego here. Today we're not factoring, we're solving quadratic spaces by factoring, like my title says. Okay, we're solving quadratic spaces by factoring. We're still using the zero product property. That's the property that we're using. But now we're going to move ahead. Before we did the difference of squares and greatest common factor. Now I can see that we have a trinomials. So that's what we're going to do today. And remember, we're solving, so that means we need to have a zero on the other side of the equal sign. So every time we're solving an expression or an equation in this case, we have to have an equal on the other side before we start proceeding to factor. Now, I don't know what I have this, but I switched those two problems in class. So I want to start with my second problem in my build work, okay, which is going to simple problem, and we move from here. Now, I got to solve, and like I said before, it has to be equal to 0. In this case, if you notice, I have my equal right here. So that means I don't have a 0 because both sides are covered by x's and other numbers, my constants. So I need to get a 0 somehow. Now, I need to bring everything to one side. Either I move the 3x and the 54 to the other side, or I bring the x squared to the right side. If I move the x squared to the right side, it's going to turn into a negative x squared, which I don't want the negative. That means I'm going to go and move the 3x and the 54 to the left side. Here you go. To get rid of the 3x, I see that it's positive, so I have to subtract. So minus 3x on the right side, minus 3x on the left side. And that's going to give me x squared minus 3x on the left equals 3x minus 3x cancels, and I have 54 left. I got to cancel the same thing with the 54. It's positive, so I do minus 54 on the right, minus 54 on the left. We got to be careful. We have no common, like terms, so everything I have to be written again. So x squared minus 3x minus 54 equals 54 minus 54 cancels, but technically you do 54 minus 54, it gives you a 0. So I write a 0. And now I can ready to factor. Very important, you need to have this equal to 0 before you start factoring, okay? So now we proceed to factoring. Let me rewrite this again so we can move on. Oh, you know what? There you go, let's scroll down. So here I have my trinomial, x squared minus 3x minus 54. Now I need to factor. Remember, the question here we solve by factoring. So how to factor a trinomial? This trinomial has no leading coefficient, so technically I have it 1 in front, okay? Again, it has no leading coefficient, so technically I have a number 1 right there. So these are the easier, I guess, trinomials to factor. How do we factor these trinomials? We do product and sum. The product is the last number, okay? What I mean by product is I need two numbers that when you multiply, you get negative 54, but at the same time, when they're added, which is here my sum, when they're added or subtracted, you get negative 3. I'll give you 10 minutes to think about it. There you go, over. So my numbers are 9 and 6. Okay, that's a 9, I'm sorry, 9 and 6. But the product is a negative number, so that means one of my two numbers have to be negative. How do I know? In order for me to know, either you try them both, or you just look at the sum. And the sum is a negative number, that means your bigger number has to be negative. And the other one has to be positive. Let's double check. Negative 9 times 6 is negative 54. Let's write out the numbers in the sum. Negative 9 plus 6 is negative 3. That means my numbers are negative 9 and 6, and we're good. Okay? Let me erase this and one more step. So my numbers are negative 9 and positive 6. Once I have my numbers ready, basically, and now it's just an easy step. I see that I have an x squared in the beginning. So that x squared is going to break into x and x. And because I find my numbers already, which is negative 9 and 6, one number comes to the front and the other comes to the back. I'm sorry, one number comes to one parenthesis and the other one comes to the second parenthesis. Because it's positive 6, then I bring the plus 6 equal to 0. After that, now we is equal to 0. That means we need to find the values of x that makes that equation 0. So every factor must be equal to 0. Every factor is that parenthesis is multiplying that parenthesis. So I have two factors. So each factor, make it equal to 0. That's why you make the line in the middle. And now make x minus 9 equal to 0 and x plus 6 equal to 0. From here, plus 9 and x equals 9. And the other side, minus 6, and you have x equals negative 6. Let me erase that because it shows like a positive 6. So my two answers are positive 9 and negative 6. Again, you can double check that in the original equation and you should get the same answer. Now let's write out the other example number 1. So again, here we factor and we solve. We start by factoring, and up to when we get to this point, that's factoring. After that, you make it equal to 0 and you keep going until you find the values of x, and now here is your final solutions. Okay, later on when you do graphing, you'll understand that those are the x-intercepts, or those are the intercepts of your parabola. Okay, you'll do that later on. Let's go back to example number 1. Here we go. Solve by factoring. So is equal to 0, so we have a step ahead of the whole thing. 1 second. Like always, whenever you're factoring, the first step is GCF. All the numbers are even, so at least it has a 2 as a common factor, and the 4 is not a common factor, so I have a 2 as a common factor. Here you go, let's start writing. 2. The x is not common, so that's it. Inside, 2x squared minus 11x, the 22 divided by 2 is 11, plus 24 divided by 2 is 12, close parenthesis, equal to 0. Now, because I have a trinomial on the inside, I gotta address that trinomial first. So I'm gonna do this trinomial, and then I'll bring the 2, and then I'll bring the equal to 0. Okay, so just the trinomial. Now, the first thing that I want to do is factor the trinomial inside the parentheses, then at the end I'll bring the 0 and I'll bring the 2. So because I have a leading coefficient that is different to 1, then I had to factor this in a different way. There are many ways how to factor this. The easiest that I think is using grouping. To do grouping, you need 4 terms. Right now I only have 3 terms, 1, 2, and 3. So I gotta find my 4 terms. How do I do that? I get 2 numbers by multiplying the leading coefficient times my constant. That's going to give me 24. So my product right now is going to be 24. So the product that we did before, which was our last term, now is just the leading coefficient times our constant. It gives me 24. The sum remains the same, negative 11, which is the middle value. Now I need 2 numbers that you multiply and you get 24, and you add and subtract and you get negative 11. So there you go, 8 times 3, very good. So 8, okay. So my 2 numbers are 8 times 3. Now, 8 times 3 is 24. But when I tried to see if the sum is going to help me out, it's going to work out, 8 plus 3 gives me 11. So I get the number, but I don't get the sign, and the sign is negative. When that happens, you have to do is just change the signs. The 8 is going to be negative, and the 3 is going to be negative. By doing that, negative 8 times negative 3 is positive 24. Negative 8 minus 3 is negative 11, and we solve the issue. So we find our 2 numbers. Okay, what is going to happen with those 2 numbers is that we're going to use the negative 8 and the negative 3 to break the middle number. So what do I mean is this. I got my numbers. Now I'm going to use those 2 numbers to break the middle one. The middle one is the negative 11x. So I'm going to write everything else, 2x squared, and then I break the negative 11x into negative 8x and negative 3x. If you notice, this minus that is negative 11x. So technically, I'm not changing the problem. I'm just, it's how it looks like, yes, because I need 4 terms. That's the only reason that I'm doing this. I'll bring down my 12 before I forget to bring it down, and I have my 12. Now I have 4 terms. Grouping, first 2 terms, and my last 2 terms. Now when I am here, I do GCF on the first parenthesis and GCF on the second parenthesis. Okay, so GCF in the first parenthesis, 2x inside x minus 4. Okay, second parenthesis, I see that I have a -3 and a 12, so the -3 goes on the 12. The x is not common, so the x stays. So let's divide. -3x divided by -3 is going to give me an x, and positive 12 divided by -3 is going to give me a -4. Here, at this stage, the two parentheses have to be the same. If they're the same, that means I'm doing my grouping correctly, which I am right now. Look at me. So, our common factor, we bring it on one side, which is x minus 4. And whatever's on the outside of the two parentheses goes to a second parenthesis, which is 2x minus 3. And that's how you factor those trinomials. I went through GCF quickly. If you need help, go back to my previous video. It was on the 24th, and I explained the step-by-step GCF and different squares. So now, if you remember, it's kind of a long process, but it's an easy process. If you remember, I had a 2, which I need to bring down, and I had an equal to 0, which I need to bring down as well. So let's do that right now. The 2 was in front of the parentheses, and the equal to 0 was at the end. At this point, I need to solve for x. Before we solve for x, I want to go back to the original problem. And I want to see which one is the highest exponent on my equation. 2 to the second power. My highest exponent is going to give me the number of solutions of this equation. Because I have a 2 as my highest exponent, that means I'm going to find two values of x. So let's find down the bottom. How many factors I have? I have 2 times x minus 4 times 2x minus 3. But how many terms or how many factors do I have that holds an x? I only have 2 factors that have an x. So those are the factors that will give me a value of x. At this point, I can get rid of the 2 simply by dividing both sides by 2. 2 divided by 2 cancels out, and I'm going to have my parentheses remaining, my other parentheses remaining, and then the other side, 0 divided by 2 is equal to 0. So what I'm saying is that when you have a value that has no variable, technically that's not affecting your final answers. Okay, so I'm gonna concentrate on the ones that have the x, my factors that have the x. And my two factors that have the x are x minus 4, that's gonna be equal to 0, and the other side is gonna be 2x minus 3 equal to 0. From the left side, plus 4 plus 4, x equals 4. And from the right side, I'm gonna have plus 3 plus 3. So I'm going to have 2x equals 3, and then divided by 3, divided by 3. I'm sorry, divided by 2, which is with the x, divided by 2, which is the x, and my x equals 3 over 2. So those are my answers. Again, I'm getting 2 answers because my highest exponent is to the second power, which is 2 answers. All right, guys, I hope you liked it. Review, please. Any comments? Put the comments underneath, like the video, subscribe to the channel. Okay, help out, please. It will be better for us, more motivation, and then we can make more videos. This video will start improving, guys. I'm working on different softwares right now. I'm not editing the videos, but as we move along, and we'll get better hopefully. Okay, guys, thanks a lot for watching. Start it, please. Take care. Have fun.